Terri, Benson, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. How are you doing up there in the Grand Junction area?
Well, right now I'm freezing. It's been snowing all day, and I'm not a cold person, so I'm not thrilled, but we need the snow, so okay.
Yeah, okay. And here we are, both on the Western Slope. I think last time we chatted, I was probably still in Denver when we did a podcast last.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
I think you were getting ready to move.
Yeah, but it's still a good 4-hour hike between us. It's pretty amazing how big this state is, and I'd still only be about halfway up the state in terms of getting all the way up to Rangeley or someplace like that. It's a big and beautiful state, that's for sure.
And the roads right now would add at least an hour to the trip,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
We are getting pounded with snow today, and we're talking on Tuesday, December 28th, and this coming Thursday and Friday, we're supposed to get really pounded. So, yep. Well, how are you doing? Last time we chatted, you were really sort of the West Slope coordinator for Rocky Mountain fiction writers and doing all the educational workshops and organizing day-long events on the Front Range and actively involved. Or you're no longer doing that on the West Slope. Is that correct?
Correct. I dropped off the board, and I am no longer the Western Slope liaison. So Pam Chiaro, who has been coming to the workshops for years, she took over for me. So she's been doing everything since partway through last year, but all of this year since they're actually starting new in-persons.
Gotcha. So does that feel like it's a little bit of a relief, even though it was probably very rewarding to have done all that?
It is a relief just because I've got so much going on right now. I loved being on the board. Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers is such a good group, but it just got to where I felt like I wasn't devoting as much time to what I needed to do what I needed to do for them. So, yeah.
Would you say, looking back, getting involved in Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, and I believe you were really heavily involved for 4 or 5, maybe longer?
It was like years? 7 years, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, just looking back, can you say that your writing career was benefited quite a bit by having been involved?
Absolutely. I would not have been published the first time in 2012 without it, and I certainly wouldn't have got the 2 contracts since then. So, I would recommend it to anybody who was trying to get going in writing. It's a great group.
It's just something about getting those networks going, in my view. Just getting those networks and having more and more conversations about what you need as a writer and finding out how other people do it, and just building that kind of that familiarity, or just making it more a part of your life. Well,
and you have people that you can call and say, hey, I don't know, where do I get somebody who can do covers, or I need an editor, and everybody knows somebody, and I would much rather have a reference for somebody than to just try to find them on my own. So right. you're guaranteed that they've got experience and somebody has really enjoyed working with them.
Right. Well, we're going to get to the main reason we're going to talk today. Well, there's lots of reasons, and I guess no one is more important than the other. We're going to get to your workshop that's coming up on the Western Slope in a minute. But in the meantime, we want to touch on the fact that you have publication news coming up for you this spring. So tell us about what's happening April 1st, I believe.
On April Fool's, and Susie promised it's not really April Fool's joke or anything. I have the first Bad Karma mystery called Pickup Artist is due out on April 1st. And it will be print and ebook and maybe audio. So we'll see. But I'm really excited. I really like that series, and they've asked for the second one so far. So I'm hoping it's going to be something that'll go on for a while.
Yeah, great. Well, we've talked about this novel, I think, a couple of times before on the podcast. It's been in the works for quite a while, correct?
Yep. This is one I've been working on, I'd say a good 4 years from the first concept to, this is actually the second story I wrote, but I cannibalized a lot off the first story to make the second one. And so it's kind of gone back and forth for a long time. And it took about a year worth of edits with COVID. And I had some stuff happen with my family last year and this year. And so between us, it added a lot of extra time. But I think it was worth it.
Yeah. Give us the setup and the premise of the pickup artist.
The main character is a female classic car restorer, and that's kind of unusual. But the biggest thing about her is when she touches an old car, she gets a sense of its history. So she knows if it was a happy or a sad or a bad car. And in this case, the pickup turns out to have been owned by a serial killer. And nobody wants to believe her, but she knows. And so she has to prove she's right, so that everybody will quit looking at her because she knows something she shouldn't know.
And is this, how would you say the tone? Is this more on the light side? Does it turn dark?
It's not a cozy.
Okay.
It's not a Stephen King or Dean Koontz type deep stuff, but it's definitely not a cozy. I have some really fun characters. I think people will really get attached to them, and but it does have some pretty serial killer stuff.
And what about the car restoration aspect of this? Is this something that you have been around, or did you have to do a fair amount of research for?
A little of both. My husband several years ago bought me a Triumph in a box. Well, a lot of boxes, and that was going to be a couple's project. And it's not in a box anymore, but it's not finished either. So wow. I've loved classic cars. My brother-in-law restores classic cars, and I was always a fan of Clive Cussler. And I started looking more and more at classic cars, going to shows. I'm going to Scottsdale in January for their big auction, just because I like the old cars, especially pre-1950s. Huh. Of course, the guys like the muscle cars, the 60s and the 70s, but I like the older ones. And so I have done a lot of research and talked to a lot of people. I talked to the guy that restored one of Clive Cussler's cars. So it's just been fun.
Huh. Can you explain that appeal or that attraction to that era or those particular machines?
I think that they are amazing. Most of them back then were much more handmade than they are now. They actually would make the engine and the frame, and then somebody else would make the chassis to put on it, so they could modify it however they wanted. And they just had the detail of just the hood ornaments and the hubcaps and their badges. And if you look at those close, they are works of art. Besides, they may have not have been the fastest thing on the road. They were at the time, maybe, but they just had some really cool innovations that I think get overlooked because they didn't make a lot of noise and they didn't go 150 miles an hour. Yeah, but very neither cool. Do I.
Yeah. And how much of your affection for this era pours into your main characters? Probably a lot.
Rennie's lots cooler than me, and she's younger and hipper, but she looks at these cars the same way I do, that they are works of art and they deserve to be back into the world, even if they started out in a box.
Well, I'm wondering, this is your third novel coming up, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
What have you learned from publishing the first two that you're going to do differently this time, or any kind of strategy or approach just to thinking about the launch that you're going to do something a little bit different?
I need to be more focused on my editing, get that has to be more of a priority than it's been in the past. And I'm learning more and more about marketing. That whole concept gives me the willies. And I'm not a big social media person, but I'm going to have to be. And I'm going to have to put myself out there more and more than I really am comfortable doing. But my publishers have given me really great, basically handbooks saying do this and do this and do this and do as many of these as you can. So it helps me a lot to have somebody say, these are your options. And then I can pick and choose what I want to do, but I have to pick and choose some of those to do. I can't just sit back and expect it to happen on its own. I tried that the first time and it wasn't a success.
Yeah. Who is your publisher, I should have asked?
The pickup artist is through Susie with Literary Wanderlust. And the romance that came out just a couple of months ago is with The Angel and the Demon is with Champagne Book Group. And then my original book was about the Titanic, a story called Unsinkable Love. And that was originally with a small firm that has now been sold to Kensington. And then I got my rights back and self-published it. So.
Wow, so you really are a hybrid author at this point.
I am, yeah. I guess I get to call myself hybrid and award-winning, so I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, tell us about the award.
That was for a short. I won first and fourth in a short story contest, so I've got that. And then I have some national awards through the National Senior Writers Association or something like that. It's, what is it? NAMPA, for articles that I've written under essays or features. So I have several of those.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that the Pickup Artist might have a sequel or might have a follow-up book coming out. You don't know about that yet?
It's been asked for by the publisher. I don't have a contract on it yet, so I've got my fingers crossed. But
yeah,
I hope that the Bad Karma Mysteries will be multiples.
Yeah, great. Bad Karma, of course, Karma.
No, Carma.
Oh, okay, well.
Bad karma,
Yeah, well, I was thinking that they might spell it. Okay, I stand corrected. That's
well,
great.
it's supposed to be with a K, but I spell it with a C because of the car side of it.
That's great. And does the romance, the books with champagne, is that going to be something that is going to be a series going forward?
Again, I hope so. That's a Lead Me Into Temptation series. And the second book has been requested as well. I don't have, again, a contract, but that's one of them. I have to finish the edits and get it over to them.
Oh, so you really have a full, busy writing life at this point, it sounds like.
It got busy all of a sudden. 2020 was a good year for me, considering everything.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting how some forward momentum on a writing career can sort of create a little lens over everything else that's going on.
Yeah, it kind of was when I first thought to myself, I am a writer. The first one, that's a fluke, it'll never happen again. And then getting 2 different contracts in the same year from 2 different publishers, that was kind of like, okay, wait a minute. Now I get to say I am legitimately a writer.
And it feels like, or it sounds like to me, that that's been internalized as well.
Yeah, it has. It's not just saying it in hopes that somebody else will believe it. I've begun to believe it myself, and I think that's what really needed to happen.
That's great. Well, one of the signs of that very fact is that you are now picking up the pace on your sharing back, teaching. You've got and we want to touch on the workshop you've got coming up for Rocky Mountain fiction writers or anybody on the Western Slope who wants to come, but it's being organized through RMFW coming up in mid-January, all about how to develop and write a story Bible for your book. So tell us a little bit about that. I gather story Bibles. Maybe some folks don't know what a story Bible is, so maybe you want to define that, and then just tell us a little bit about your history with story Bibles.
Okay. Well, the workshop's called Story Bible. What is a story Bible, and what divine purpose does it serve? So I discovered story Bibles after the first story, which was historical, set on the Titanic. And so I had a ton of research. I had a lot of time frames. I went from being on the Titanic, starting in Ireland, going onto the Titanic, and then going to the New England factories, clothing factories. And so I had so much to keep track of, and I would find research and I would take what I needed, then I'd need more, and then I couldn't find that research again. I couldn't ever quite get the keywords right. Or I would find out when I read through it again that I had them having lunch before breakfast, or the weather didn't match up, or I spelled their name one way at the beginning of the book, and by the end of the book I was spelling it a different way. So when I found out that a story Bible is basically an organizational tool to keep all of that straight, I set up my spreadsheets and I started using it for these next 2 books. And especially since they're a series, I think it's really going to be helpful. But it helps me keep my timeline straight, for one thing, because part of my story Bible is a timeline, chapter by chapter. So I know what time of day it is, what time of year if there's who the point of view characters are. So if there's more than one, I know I have to be really careful that I use that properly and I don't head hop. What action takes place there. So then I can again make sure that that action belongs in that chapter and not someplace else. So I use that. I also use it to set up my characters so I know what they look like. I develop their backstory, and that helps me get their motivation right during the story. And I can build my world there. I can, create where everything goes in that town, if it's a totally made up one or if it follows along with something that really exists. And then I can also find out, one of my stories, I had a very major character in the beginning of the book, and then they disappeared for 12 chapters. And I had to go back and add them back in because they were more important. I had forgot what part they were going to play. And so all of those different things can be put into a story Bible. And instead of having to try to remember everything, or you're editing it and you think you're almost done it, you suddenly realize you've left somebody out, or your timeline got way off halfway through and you didn't notice it. You have a document that you can pull up frequently. And I do it every time I add a new person. Even if it's the barista at Starbucks, I'll put them in there because that barista may end up be my killer or a red herring somewhere later down the road. And I want to know what chapter they were in or what I called them so I can do a quick search and replace or find them again and expand maybe that first mention of them so that they are better suited when I need them later. So sometimes I have things in there I never need again, but with a series, I may need them again.
Yeah.
So, I use a real simple Excel spreadsheet because you can add columns and rows so easily. And so I can expand it for people. My cars are characters in Bad Karma. So I keep track of what kind of a car it is, what kind of wheels I put on it, where do I order my parts from. So there's just tons of things that go in there. And it's the only way I know of to keep track of all of it.
Yeah. Is a story Bible something you work on before you start writing, or is it something that you keep updating as you keep writing?
Both, actually. When I knew I was going to write the story, of course, I had my main character, Rennie, but her backstory has expanded as I've written more of that story and then got into the second book. And now I have a third one that I've got the basis for. And then as the other characters developed, I put them in there, but again, I've gotten more and more information about them that I added to it. So it's a living document. It keeps expanding. And then with the second in the series, I basically start with that same story Bible, but I may remove or have much less about characters that aren't going to repeat. But it seems like you always reference back to something that happened in the first story. So I don't get rid of everything. And then I will just keep adding that in, and then eventually, some of those first characters, maybe 3 or 4 or 10 books down the road, won't appear in the story Bible anymore. But then again, if I didn't kill them off, maybe they will. So.
Now, you use the word spreadsheet. I run screaming at the word spreadsheet. I just am not a spreadsheet guy, even just for keeping track of basic things. Do you have to be a spreadsheet person to be a story Bible person?
No, I use it simply because, like I say, it's easy for me to add and subtract from. But I originally started using a 3-ring binder with just a kind of a pre-printed form that I would fill out for each person. Then I could flip back and forth through it. I could take a page out. I could add a photograph of somebody who reminded me of my character. So that's for somebody who's very visual. There are several software programs that I've seen, but I am not a software program person. I want the simplest thing I can get. And for me, that's Excel spreadsheet because, it's easy to work with. But whatever floats anybody's boat, if it helps keep them organized for this kind of thing, I think that's their story Bible.
To what level of detail are you keeping track of, say, a character prefers this kind of food or this color room or this length coat or anything like that? I mean, does every single detail ultimately get loaded up?
Not necessarily, but I have some things that repeat. Like Rennie has a nervous habit of running her fingers through her hair. She has short hair, so it's always sticking up. Her shop foreman always tries to give her noogies. They're just really good friends, and so they have this bantering thing go back and forth. And she has an uncle who, and her uncle and her great uncle. Anyway, they like to drink. Yeah, I have to look and see. Actually, Bubber is her great uncle's son, so he's technically a cousin. But they drink a lot, and they prefer certain kinds of beer, and they have another friend who is a billionaire, and so he has a whole different lifestyle. But I talk about their history when they were doing single track racing and stock car racing, and so it's basically, if I need them to be able to do something, then I might have to figure out how they can be able to do that. And so that's where my story Bible would come in. Where did they learn to do what they need to do for this story? So I will develop that. Or if, I don't know about you, but my characters take off and do their own thing on a regular basis. So they may suddenly decide that they don't like something, or everything in her house is kind of old. She has an old refrigerator. She has it's a farmhouse that's got all hand scraped floors and handmade trim, and when it gets blown up, she gets everything replaced as original as possible because she loves old things. Not everybody in the story is like that. So I just have to figure out why she would do what she does, or why some other character would do what they do. And it kind of just comes out of, as we're going along, suddenly they'll say, oh yeah, I like this. I'm like, where did that come from? I didn't pick that.
As you're grabbing a little sip of water there, why don't you tell us, or water or something, why don't you tell us when the workshop is, and should participants who plan to come bring anything in particular? Is it for people who have written before? Do you need to have been, somebody who's completed a novel, or is it somebody just starting to dream one up?
Yes. So it's January 15th, and it'll be down here at the incubator in Grand Junction. The website has the address, and it's kind of hard to find, so follow the directions. And it's for people that are just getting started, because sometimes when you're starting, you don't really know how much information you need, how much detail you want. So you may over-research or you may under-research. And by having that story Bible there, you have a place to put more in, or you can go back and go, well, I don't really need that now. But rather than delete it, keep it there. You might want it later. You never know what you're going to need until you're to the end for about the 8th time on that story, because when you edit, you may find you have a dead spot, you have to add more in, or your character is just too flat and you need something more for them. So it works great for newbies. It also, to me, works great for somebody who is maybe halfway. Is usually when I really start looking at my story Bible and my timeline, because that's when I start to get confused on time frames. And they always call it the saggy middle, because you've kind of had all the excitement up front and you know how it's going to end, but you got to get from point A to point C, and B can be kind of touchy. So
right.
That's when I really get into it.
Gotcha. Should folks bring their laptop and then you'll show them how to set up a spreadsheet? Just to
they can bring laptop, or just bring something to write with. I do a presentation up on a screen, so I show what my examples of mine look like, and then I have some examples of some other ones that are out there and available.
Gotcha.
But again, because I don't use them, it's more, these are some for you to look at, pick what works for you. But the workshops are about, I think, a total of 3 hours, including breaks and different things. So there's plenty of time to ask questions and to look and see, if they can actually be, if they have their laptop or have a format with them, they can actually be maybe putting some of their information in there as they go along.
Right. Very good. Well, in addition to the Story Bible workshop in mid-January in Grand Junction, you're also teaching at Pikes Peak Writers Conference in, I believe you said late April?
April 29th to May 1st, yeah.
Okay. And tell us about those classes that you're planning to teach.
I'll be teaching 3 workshops. One includes the Story Bible. Another one is making money while writing your great American novel, because some of us need a little extra money especially if it's going to take us 20 years to write your first story. There are ways to make money using your writing experience, which gets you better experience and makes you a better writer. And then looking for research in all the right places, because people tend to think there's only one place to go anymore, and that's Google. And that is not necessarily the best place for everything, and it's not necessarily where you'll get the greatest information. So I give some examples of a bunch of other places people can go. Some of it may actually require stepping away from the computer, but I do go through those.
That's amazing.
And then,
there's another option besides Google? Come on.
There's a few of them, actually. And then I'm on a panel with 3 other writers on romance. So that'll be interesting, because I've never been on a panel before. And I've never met the other 3 presenters. So
oh, wow.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Have you been involved in Pikes Peak Writers for a while as well as RMFW?
I don't belong to Pikes Peak, but I have presented at a conference a couple of years ago with a couple of presentations, I think. And then I'm a member of the Mystery Writers and Sisters in Crime. So I kind of try to get as much information and belong to as many of these great groups as I can, because they're all so helpful.
Yep. Pikes Peak, terrific organization, and the conference is always so highly lauded by everybody who goes. So
it is.
Yeah,
it's a great one.
I want to go back to the Great American Novel one, though. Are you saying that you're also writing not that The Pickup Artist is not the Great American Novel, but
are you sure?
Well, it could. Yeah, I am. It could be. So, are you writing a literary novel?
No, that is just the title, because a lot of people, when they're starting out, they're writing their opus. It's, they don't know when it will be done, but they know what they're trying to write. And in the meantime, there's expenses going to conferences and buying writing books and entering contests. And so I've just tried to come up with some ways that people can help self-fund their writing journey. So no, the Great American Novel, I will be a world famous writer sometime before my name fades in history. It may be well after I'm dead, who knows, but I do believe that I will be an award-winning writer by the time I quit.
There you go. That's great. I believe it. That's great. Yeah. So would you plan to also present at RMFW Colorado Gold then next fall? I
will probably submit another contest another workshop next year. I did this year, but they get so many great submissions. I would hate to be on I was on the selection committee a couple years ago, and I don't envy anybody having to pick through all of those, because there's just so many of them and they only have so much time. So I usually will submit something and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, as we wind up here, having gotten an overview, I have 2 last questions for you. One is, since we're talking on December 28th as the New Year's approaches, are you a New Year's resolution type of person?
I'm one of those that comes up with resolutions and then immediately starts breaking them. So it's kind of an exercise in futility. But, I always I'm going to do this starting with the first of the year. And I'm going to get all my edits done in time. I'm going to work on the next set of books for each series. And I'm going to lose weight and, the usual.
But so there's really sort of half-hearted belief in them, or sounds to me that, yeah.
Well, I always figure if I say it enough, I'll believe it and I'll act on it. And I think that having the books published should help my motivation with that. And I have an actual office set up now, it's been in the storeroom for the last several years, and I finally have my own desk and my own place. So this winter when it's cold outside, I'm hoping that will be my motivation to make sure I stick with some of these resolutions.
That's great. And as always, as we wrap up, we always like to get one book or writer recommendation from our guests so we can sort of pay it forward a little bit. So now's your chance.
Well, I am in the process of reading The Bird Patient by Sue Hinklin, and I'm really enjoying it. I got to go back and buy the one before it and the one after it, because there's references there that I got to find out what they mean and what happens with them. So that's my current book on tape.
Great. Well, Sue Hinken, who is the current Writer of the Year for RMFW, and
for a good reason.
And award-winning mystery writer, so that is fantastic. Excellent. Well, Terri, thank you so much. Good luck with the Story Bible workshop on January 15th, and best of luck launching The Pickup Artist on April 1st, and with all your endeavors. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. We'll see you soon, I hope.
Yep, you bet.